Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live Q&A. My name is Shakina, and I'm here today to answer all of your OET questions live. We'll begin straight away. The format of this session is really, really simple. So if you've joined before, you know that you can type in your question or comment on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're joining from. I'll see your comment or question and answer your questions as we go through the next hour. If you're new, welcome. If you've not joined any of these sessions before, really you can ask any sort of question related to OET, whether it's reading, listening, writing, speaking, or if it's about preparation in general. We're always happy to hear your questions. We love hearing your questions. And I will try my best to answer as many as possible in the next hour. So this session is completely unscripted. It's led by you. And so really, if there's no such thing as a silly question. You can ask any question and I'll be happy to, like I said, answer as many as possible. All right. And before we begin, I would just like to sort of give you a little bit about, give you a little resource that we have, is one of our excellent resources for writing and speaking. And this resource is our graded sample booklet. So the reason why I've brought it up is because we find a lot of candidates don't know about some of our great resources, and this is one of them. If you're looking to improve in your writing or your speaking, and you want to see what a good sample looks like, especially a grade B, if that's the grade you're aiming for, you would be able to see that in these booklets. These booklets contain real samples of writing and speaking from candidates just like you, and they have been graded with assessor commentary, so you can see the strengths and weaknesses of these letters and of the role plays, so you know what a good sample looks like and where it could even improve. So please do have a look at our graded samples. They are free to download from our website, and I'm actually just going to put the link to them in the chat right now, so you can go and check out these samples, bookmark the link, and check out the samples for your preparation. All right, so I think we've got a few questions have already come in, and I'm going to have a look now. All right. I've got a question here on speaking from Hayat, who joins us on YouTube, and they're asking, if I don't finish all bullet points on the speaking role before the time goes off, will I automatically fail, or is the quality of communication more important than finishing the list? So the quality of communication is what is important. Now, the bullet points on the roll card are a guide for your conversation, and following them in order, that would be a structure for a logical conversation. But like I just said, your focus should be on carrying out a patient-centered conversation rather than on getting to the points before 5 minutes is up. So you're not in any way if you've not finished all of the tasks. When you're conducting a role, your focus should be on listening to the patient, responding to the patient, and making sure that you're demonstrating, of course, the linguistic criteria, but also the clinical communication criteria. The clinical communication criteria involves things like information giving information to your patient in a way that is easy to understand, breaking up information. It also involves information gathering, so asking open-ended questions at the right time, asking close-ended questions when you need to. So all of those things go into the assessment of your role play. It's not just finishing the tasks on the role card. Now, if you would like to learn a bit more about the assessment criteria, and especially the clinical communication criteria, I would encourage you to download our speaking guides. We have two speaking guides. One guide covers the linguistic criteria, which are the language related aspects that the assessors are looking at. And the other guide covers the clinical communication criteria, which are the communication aspects that the assessors look at when assessing role play. Our speaking guides are on our speaking page on the chat, and you'll also be able to see this if you set our pages. And so I've put that in the chat. You'll be able to see the guides, both the guides on our speaking page. Okay, I've got a question here from Sylvia asking for tips on reading part B and C. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm also getting, just reading a few messages that the audio is not clear. So my apologies for that. I will a bit repeat the answer that I just gave. So let me come back to that. And my apologies that the audio isn't great today. Hopefully that should sort itself out. All right. So yes, getting back to Sylvia's question about tips for reading part B and C. So just going to take off your question there, Sylvia, and bring up some tips for reading part B, and then I'll talk about part C as well. All right, so with reading part B and C, remember that you have 45 minutes between both of those parts. And so you need to set your time well between them. We recommend about 10 minutes to 12 minutes for reading part B. That would give you about 35 minutes for reading part C. And then again, there are two passages in part C, so splitting your time equally between those two passages. So that's sort of the time management aspect. When it comes to part B, remember that each question is new, it's different and not connected in any way. So it's a good idea to approach each question individually. As soon as you've answered one question, forget about it and move to the next question. Of course, if you want, you can come back later once you've at the end. That's absolutely fine. But remember, the questions aren't related in any way, and it's important to get yourself in a sort of new frame of mind as you approach the new question, the next question. The second tip is to make sure that you look for evidence to support your choice. Now, what do I mean by this? A lot of times candidates look for keywords in answer options and try and spot those keywords or maybe even synonyms in the text and try and match options with the text that way. But reading parts B and C are designed in such a way that the focus of the question and the options is always on the meaning. And so it's important for you to understand the question, but also look for evidence beyond keywords in the text. That's what's the option. And a good way to do this is to look for evidence for why your answer is correct. but also for why the other options are incorrect. And while this might take a bit of time to do initially, you find yourself, okay, maybe you take 5 minutes to do a part B question because you're doing this. That's absolutely fine, because the more you do it, you'll find your brain sort of becomes automatically tuned to it, and you're able to do it sort of just sort of automatically on test day. And so that's a good way to approach your practice, to look for evidence for both correct and incorrect answer options, and really look for evidence. Really, write out those sentences, even you know, really work through those options. And then the third tip, especially for part B, is read the sentence which you think has the answer in more than once. It's easy to, like I said earlier, match keywords or phrases even, but it's important that you check your answer before you, finally select as answer. And reading the sentence which you think has the answer in more than once is a good way to build that into your your strategy. So those were the tips for part B. And the first tip also applies to part C, because each question relates to a separate part of the text. And in part C, it's always referenced. The question is always referenced. So you'll always see in the question that is in the paragraph, there's a clear word or phrase that links to paragraph. So that's another tip for C as well, to approach each question individually. So hopefully those tips help you for both of those parts. Okay. Question here from Ebebe on YouTube, asking, when you're writing a letter, do you write the date given in the subtest or the date of the test day? So when you are using official material, you'll always find the date of the test, the date of the letter. Sorry, let me rephrase that. In officials, there's always a sentence that says, assume today's date is. And you'll find in a lot of official materials, that is the date that you should use when you're writing your letter. I've got a question here from Mahaz on YouTube saying, could you please clarify the difference between an update letter and a discharge letter in terms of structure? So in OET, there are roughly 3 types of letters. You have discharge letters, you have trans letters, and you have letters. These are the roughly the 3 types of letters for most professions. However, the way to approach the letter and how you structure it is the logic is the same. So when you are thinking about structuring your letter, you are thinking about the reader. And that's what you should be thinking about. So there's no fixed structure for any of these kinds of letters. The structure for your letter will come from the case notes and what is important for the reader to know. And your structure should reflect the important information, or should highlight the important information for the reader, so that the reader can immediately understand what's important, and it will make complete sense to them. There won't be any confusion because of the that's how you should sort of approach any kind of letter that you get in OET task. You need to think about the reader. And ready page. These are answer common questions that candidates ask, just like this one. And there is an excellent blog, three main OET letter types in the writing service. That's the name of the blog. I'm just posting the link to that blog in chat now. That goes through in a little bit more detail what I have just explained about how you approach the letter and organizing the letter in the same way with the reader in mind, regardless of the type of letter. All right, we've still got some comments about audio. So I'm just going to see if I can do something about that. All right. So what I might do is just repeat some of the answers that I've just given, and hopefully the audio will come back. The network will be okay. All right, so this was the first question from Hayat. And this was about the bullet points on the card, finishing off the bullet points on the card before the timer goes off. If that would cause someone to automatically fail, or if the quality of communication is more important than finishing the list. So just to repeat what I said a little bit earlier, and my apologies for the audio issues. You don't need to finish all the tasks on the speaking roll card, and you will definitely not fail automatically if you don't finish them. The tasks on the roll card are a guide to help you, order the conversation and to continue conversation. But you should be on patient and carrying a patient-centered conversation with them. So you need to focus on exhibiting some of the skills in the clinical communication criteria. And I encourage you to visit our speaking page, where you will find our speaking guides. There are two guides. One is the guide to the linguistic criteria, and other is the guide to the clinical communication criteria. Both of those criteria are what assessors use to mark your role play, and you need to have a good understanding of both. So I'm going to put it the understand what you need to do well in your role play. All right. Let me see if I can pick up another question. was some audio trouble. This question was the difference between an update letter and a discharge letter in terms of structure. And so there are, as I explained, there were three main kinds of letters in OET writing, which is referral letter, discharge letter, transfer letter. These are types of letters that are commonly found in healthcare professions across the world. But when it comes to writing and approaching the writing test, your strategy and the way you think about these letters should be the same. And that is, you need to have the reader front and center when you are reading the case notes and planning your response. The structure of your letter needs to highlight to the reader what's important for them to know and what information needs to be paid attention to. So for example, putting something that's really important at the beginning of a paragraph rather than burying it within the paragraph is really important part of that, of highlighting, of giving your letter the structure that will help your reader understand what they need to do quickly and efficiently. So, it doesn't matter what type of letter you're writing. There is no separate format for these types of letters, no fixed structure. You really need to think on your feet on test day and create a structure that suits your reader. I'm going to put into the chat our writing guide. Our writing guide walks you through this criteria, and there's a chapter on automation and layout, which talks about structure and talks about information about how you Right. It seems that we're still having some network issues. So my apologies that we got cut out for a little bit there. Um, but hopefully I'm back and we can continue with all of your questions. And thank you for your patience and being around. Um, all right, I've got a question here from True Story on YouTube asking if in the recommendation paragraph, which way is it better to begin? It would be appreciated, or I would appreciate you. All right. So I just want to split your question into two parts. The first is about the recommendation paragraph. Now, as I said a little bit earlier, there is no fixed structure to how you organize your letter. You might have one paragraph describing or dedicated to maybe the medical history of a patient in one kind of letter because the case notes demand that, but in another letter you might have just a sentence on the medical history, and so there is no fixed paragraph structure. Now, by recommendation paragraph, you probably mean the final paragraph where you're sort of highlighting some really important actions for the reader to complete. And so you're kind of ending your letter on highlighting those bits. And really, there is again no one way to write that paragraph, that kind of paragraph. You can begin any way you like. The So the first sentence, it would be appreciated if you could, and you could go on with that. It is slightly more perhaps formal. Um, you liked. Really, there is no one way to write that, and you could even write please, and sort of give your recommendation there. So really, there is no one way to to write your sentences or your paragraphs. You need to be flexible with your writing, and you need to use what is relevant for the reader on test day. Hopefully, the internet is back now. All right, I've got a question here from Twist, who's joined us on YouTube, asking, could I have the link for the graded sample booklets? Absolutely. And I have got that link, which I'm putting in chat right. And hopefully that has come through to you. Um, right now. All right. Um, it looks like we might be in and out with the network issues. So please bear with me. I'm really sorry about this. All right. I've got a question here or a comment that I'm just going to pick up from Hayat. again on YouTube saying many people say the real OET exam is harder than the official practice materials. Um, come test. New tests are written. So new reading, listening tests are written. New tests are written, and while the test is standardized, there is a slight, perhaps, difference in the level of challenge between those tests, and that is accounted for in the grade boundaries. So there is no single pass mark. The pass mark sort of is calculated based on that particular test. But what we do recommend is when you are practicing with official materials, when you're practicing with listening and reading, you aim to get between 30 and 32 when you're practicing with materials. So typically of 30. And if you want to sort of really be assured that you're on the right track, it's always a good idea to aim higher than just the absolute minimum. Um, so when it comes to official tests that are on our website, they are designed to reflect the level of challenge that you would encounter in the real test. So, and that's why we recommend practicing with them. And so, you know, it's like I said, it's a good idea to aim for those sort of low 30s, but that is the absolute minimum. We do encourage you to aim for for much higher. All right. But one last thing I would say though is if you are practicing with unofficial material, so material that's not on our website, on not in our store, then that's where you could encounter real problems where something that you've practiced for is not what you see on test day, because unofficial materials, they can misrepresent the test and the level of challenge in the test. So just watch out and make sure that you are really using official material and not unofficial material that sometimes can look like it's from OE, right? Um, let's keep going, and um, let's look at some of your newer questions. And if you've just, please do feel free to put into chat questions or your comments, and I will try and get to them if I can. Right, I've got a question here from Soria on YouTube who's asking, could you tell me how to prepare for OET if you want to settle in the UK or in Australia? So yes, OET is the preferred test for healthcare professionals when they're looking to, settle in countries for work, like the UK, like Australia, like New Zealand, Ireland, and a whole lot more. Now, how you prepare for OET is the same, regardless of the country that you choose to settle in, because the test, the OET test, assesses skills that are needed in an English speaking healthcare environment. And so those skills are what you will learn as you're preparing for OET. Those are the skills that you're going to really use once you you go to your dream country and you start working, the skills that you've prepared for the test are going to be skills you will use every single day. And that's what our candidates tell us. They tell us that they're using their writing skills. They're writing letters every day when they're speaking to patients. They're really using all of the clinical communication criteria, the skills in the criteria, as they're speaking with patients. So that's important to remember as we start out, is that you're not just preparing for the test, you are preparing for real life. And that's what is really a benefit of preparing for the OET test. Now, if you're looking to prepare, there are roughly two things you need to keep in mind. One is your the amount of time you have to study. So if you are working full time, obviously you've got a limited number of hours every week or every day that you can prepare. Remember that you have to keep in mind the hours that you spend working, but also living life. Things like family responsibilities, exercise, cooking, all of those things are important to factor in when you're thinking about study time. You want to make sure you dedicate enough time, but you also leave enough time for real life. So that's important. How much can you dedicate every day or every week? Maybe it's not every day, maybe it's every week, towards your study. Have a realistic idea of that. Then the next thing you need to look at is your language level, and where you are in terms of your language level. And having that in mind, and then looking at the score that uh, your regulator or the country that you're aspiring to go to, that regulator accepts for the subtests, then having that in mind and seeing how far you are away from your current level of language and the level that the regulator accepts. So if you're further away from that level, you would need to spend more time, and then that will bring you back to your calculation of how much time do I have every week or every day. So those are the two factors that you need to keep in mind. There's no fixed number, so I can't give you a fixed number, but keep those two in mind as you think about preparing and how you're going to, or when you're going to be able to sit your test. And always keeping in mind that the time that you prepare is time well worth your effort. It's time that's going to help you when you actually go to the UK or go to Australia. All right, I've got a comment here from True Stories on YouTube, and True Stories asking there to predict about the March 7th test. So, just a word of caution here that there are a lot of videos on social media, on different channels that predict, or try to predict rather, upcoming tests, and that is absolutely wrong. It is considered malpractice, and we do not encourage that you watch these videos, or that you sort of exchange anything about live tests or upcoming tests or past tests. And really, honestly, there is no way to predict what would come in the test, and your time is well worth. It's better to invest your time in using the different strategies that you've been preparing for, reviewing, maybe creating a checklist for yourself. If your test is coming up in a couple of days, sort of just going back and reflecting on areas of strength and of weakness, and thinking about that as you approach test day. Another thing that you could do as you approach test day is to really find out and to make sure that you are very clear with where you need to go, how you're going to get there, making sure you have all of the material that you need, your ID and all of that in place before the day, so you're not panicking last minute. This is what we would encourage you to do in the last couple of days before the test, and not indulge or watch these videos, which can actually be really really harmful to your preparation and all of the hard work that you have put in. All right, so I've got a question here from Viji on YouTube saying, could you please share some reading and listening materials? Yes, I absolutely can. And when it comes to materials, there are two types of materials, maybe, if you could look at it that way. One is your practice tests, which are really good to practice your test taking skills, learning about the format, managing your time, and practicing answers, how to answer MCQs, for example. All of those test taking skills are something you can get from practice tests. The other type of materials that I'm going to talk about now are really, really helpful materials if you want to work on improving your score. So, improving your language skills, that's going to improve where you're going to actually see a difference in your score. Now, where can you find these other materials and what am I talking about? I'm going to recommend the study guide. The OET study guide is on our Ready page. It's a free downloadable PDF that you can use. It has all of our best preparation advice in one place, and it's downloadable, and you can actually mark off, so it's interactive. You can mark off as you complete each resource. And so I'm going to share my screen. Um, and I'm going to show you can find the study guide, and also all right, so I'm just going to do that now. Hopefully you can see my screen. All right. It's probably just coming up. And so this is oet.com. To find the study guide, go to our Ready page and click Ready. Scroll down and you will see the study guide. And all you need to do is F. And so I'm just going to reshare to the guide. It opens up as a PDF, and I'm going to just share. You have a section dedicated to each part of the test. So you have a focus part on focus on each part. Right. Just adding the study guide. Hopefully, you can see that coming up now. So, like I said, you have a dedicated section to each part of the test. And at the end of each section, you have an area called resources. So here we see you have reading resources, and that's where you'll find links to different material that you can um, use to improve your skills for part C, for example, in this part of the test, because this section of the guide is all about part C. Um, so that's where you can find the extra resources. We have a listening section, so you will see resources there for listening. And this is all in the study guide, which is a free downloadable resource that I have just shared in chat as well. So please do go to our study guide, our ready page, download our study guide, and use that. It has a wealth of resources for you to practice, lots of material for you to practice with. So just putting that in chat now. All right. Right, I've got a question here from Sylvia on YouTube asking if Chashan, for example, does not have official is not official practice material. So there might be lots of materials out there, like this one. I obviously don't know names of all of them, but what I know is you can oet.com, and that is the only place to find official practice material. If you find material anywhere else, then it is likely to be unofficial, and I advise caution when you're using it. So go to oet.com, you'll find all of our free material on the ready page, and all of the if you're looking for additional material to purchase, you'll find it in our store. There's also a lot of free courses that we have on our store. So our intro to OET course is on our store. You can add it to your cart. You won't be charged for it. Just check out, follow the process, and you will, you'll get instructions on how you can register for the course and sign in. So that's our intro to OET course, for example. That is free. That's on our store. And like I said, finding material on our page and in our store is really the only reliable way to official material. The link, and there's a fair bit of free material there as well. And if you would like to know which ones are free, just go to the OET store and use the price filter, and filtered to under 20. There's, starts with 25 Australian dollars. So just filter to under, use that filter under $25, and you will see free courses there on that result. Uh, all right, so I'm just going to look for some more questions that have some of, just looking for some newer questions. Okay, Hayat on YouTube saying, if the interlocutor is being very quiet and giving one word answers, what's the best strategy to keep the conversation flowing, to show my range of language? So, Hayat, first of all, you know, the interlocutor, um, their role, and like patients, they may respond with a lot or little information. Um, so it's part of your test to manage it. The assessors hear both the voices in the recording, and they will score you based on your management of the conversation. And so the performance of the interlocutor won't affect your score. So you can rest assured of that. One thing perhaps I would recommend is, perhaps if you find that the interlocutor might be, not so forthcoming with information, you could just have a think and pause and think about the situation in your role card, and think about whether that's a situation in which the patient might maybe normally be, quiet, or just offering very short answers. Maybe it's that kind of a situation. And then your job, what you could do is explore their perspective, explore why, you can sense that something's bothering them. Perhaps explore that and see if that, if because of the situation in the role card, that could be where you need to use that skill, or you need to demonstrate the skill of exploring a bit more about the patient's perspective, or gathering their reactions on what you have just said. So that's one way to approach it. Your job in the role play is not necessarily to show a range of language. That's not what the assessors are looking for. Language is just one criterion of all of the criteria. Um, like I said earlier, you need to demonstrate the commission criteria, the skills there. And that's what is perhaps understanding those the criteria and those skills there, and seeing maybe it's related to the situation, and if you can draw out something from the interlocutor. The second situation could be if perhaps you're not happy with your test day experience. This is, of course, something that we are very interested in hearing about, and therefore you can go to our website and make a complaint about your test day experience if you feel that it has not been up to the standard that you were expecting. And of course, you must do this within 2 days of your test. So those are some things to think about for you. And I would encourage you to think about the first that I described. Is perhaps there's something that you could demonstrate, an opportunity for you to demonstrate based on the situation and the role card. But rest assured that the interlocutor's performance is not going to affect your performance. All right, I think we've almost come to the end of our session today. And I'm just going to think I've got time for one more question, and I'm going to pick up this question from Krishnan on Facebook saying, how do you write the patient's feeling in the in an OET letter? For example, he feels exhausted. So yes, in your OET letter, you must report things in a clinical and a factual way. Not bringing your own subjective opinion or judgment into the words that you're using. So, for example, if the patient has said that they feel exhausted, and this is something that's in the case notes, you can definitely use that. The patient reports feeling exhausted. You could definitely do that. And so it's important to pick up those phrases. You can pick those up directly from the notes. And if you sometimes, usually in the notes, they're indicated in inverted commas to show that this is what the phrase that the patient used, and you could pick that up. Or you could use a synonym that accurately matches that phrase, for example. But it's important to make sure that whatever you use, you're reporting that in a clinical way, in a factual way, and not you're using your own subjective opinion on what's being described in the notes. All right, so I think with that, we've come to the end of the session. Thank you again for joining me today. And we are going to be continuing with these sessions as we have been. So please do look out and watch out on our social pages to see announcements of when the next session is going to be. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our Facebook or liked us, subscribed on our YouTube channel, please do that so that you can stay updated of events like this and be reminded of when we're going live next. Thank you again for joining me. Bye for now.